is going to be about making coursework great. The actual number of slides is quite short. How cool is that for a background? I really like that. Nothing to do with me, by the way. This was just a suggestion, but I'm gonna animate it for you because I'm quite proud of it. So making coursework great. Obviously, you still need to listen to the advice from whoever teaches you for the specifics of your coursework, because I can't comment on that. But I'm just going to go through the different sections and just give you a little bit of advice about what helps you get up to the top band, because yeah, that's obviously what you're aiming for. So for your context, which is the first section, your context has an aim, it has 3 hypotheses, it has a location section, a theory section, a risk assessment and ethical considerations. All right, so all of that is considered to be a context. The icing on the cake for a context are the 2 things written in front of you. So the range of sources. What the mark scheme says is to get the top band you need a wide range of sources. Now there is no number given to that, but I think it's got to be, you know, at least in the 20s for me to consider it to be a range. And for me to really think wide range of sources, it can't just all be BBC News or geography revision or whatever. It's got to have some academic sources and potentially a book or a journal article or a podcast, or just try and think a little bit outside the box. Now the Gale database, which is accessed via the LC's intranet site, the LC pay for the Gale database. So if you've ever heard of Google Scholar, it's like a version of that, but generally when you find a good academic article on Google Scholar, it comes up and you click on it and there's like, now pay us 20 quid or something. Gale database, we've got access to the articles and you can filter by source type, so you can get rid of all the websites and just get the academic journals and stuff. So I would recommend that as a way to do it. And just before you panic and think, oh my God, I cannot do any more footnoting. There are kind of 2 things we look at for range of sources. One of them is your footnotes, or if you're doing Harvard, the ones in the brackets. But there will be sources that you don't directly quote, therefore they're not actually footnoted, or you don't have Harvard referencing. But there should be, in everyone's coursework, a separate bibliography right at the end. And your bibliography is a list of sources that you looked at, but you didn't ever directly quote them. So it doesn't require a lot of extra effort to go off and find a few more sources and just put them in your bibliography, all right? Because it doesn't involve having to footnote or do anything. So that would be my first bit of advice. And then I'm going to show you some exemplars right at the end. But I will obviously give you access to them as well. The really, really good pieces of coursework link their location and their theory. So for example, if you were doing a beach and you were talking about longshore drift, you would talk about which direction longshore drift usually goes in your stretch of coastline. And that's because the prevailing wind is from the southwest or whatever. If you're able to do that, that would be amazing. Method. To be honest, it's just that the depth and detail, like the method section is not, for many students, all that long. It's the detail. I say this to everybody, but I'll remind you, what you're supposed to do as an examiner is you're supposed to read the method and think, do I have enough instructions that I could go out and exactly replicate this data collection? Or have you not told me what units of measurement and how many decimal places and what's the name and at what height should I hold it? Like, it is that level of detail. So that might be one thing. But generally, the other thing is sampling. It's quite easy to say, I use systematic sampling. What would be Nice is if you could say not only why that was good, but also why is it better than random? Why is it better than whatever other techniques were available? A little bit more on sampling would help, and the level of detail would be really good. Right, your data. PAI is data presentation. Just remember that that's anything visual. It could be a pie chart, scatter graph, a map. Analysis is maths, and interpretation is writing. Jumble all three of those up together, please. So you would have a pie graph, a pie chart, then you'd write about it. Then you might have a Mann Whitney and you'd write about it. Then you might have a word cloud. Jumble it all up. That is the best way to do it. So, range of techniques again. I always say that's definitely one to ask your teacher. Have I got enough techniques here? But, you know, if you've got a graph, some annotated photos, a map, and maybe a word cloud or whatever, that kind of thing. I'm not talking 20 here. That's kind of for sources. Here I'm like, you know, a range I would say is 4 to 5 things, maybe more, but somewhere in that ballpark. But I would definitely run that by your teacher, because appropriateness trumps range. So don't do techniques for the sake of doing them, because if they're considered to be inappropriate for the data, it's actually going to harm your mark. I'm trying to think of an example. So lots of students who've collected, let's say, environmental quality scores at different places around a town, that could not be plotted on a line graph. Like, that makes no sense on a line graph. That would be inappropriate. You'd be marked down for it. So try to make them appropriate, and as long as they are, then you can have a range. Stats tests. Now, you might need to ask your teacher about these. Stats tests should really have their own hypotheses. I've got a separate video all about how to do stats tests. Mann Whitney is a test for difference. Spearman's is a test for relationship. Chi-squared is a test for distribution or pattern. So if I just give you one example, what I would do then at the start of my stats test is I would have a positive hypothesis, which would say something like, there will be a difference between data set A and data set B, and the null hypothesis, spelt N-U-L-L, would say there will not be a difference between data set A and data set B. So for Spearman's, the phrasing would be relationship, Mann Whitney, the phrasing would be difference, and chi-squared, the phrasing would be distribution or pattern. So each stats test really should have a prediction that you are going to prove something and a prediction that you're not going to prove something at the very beginning. Okay, that's really good. And then you don't have to include the workings, but you need the result. You must have critical values to get a good mark. So you've got, and if you're confused, you need to talk to your teacher about those, but you must have the critical values. And then you need a sentence or two that actually says what your stats test means. Like, have you found something? If you have, are you 95% sure or 99% sure? Or have you not found anything? And like, the more you can say about that, the better, essentially. And then your written bit, your data interpretation, try to be synoptic. Now, being synoptic is linking to other modules. And I have to be honest, in geography, it's kind of hard not to, but you sort of need to force it a little bit for your coursework. So if you were talking about Samosphere succession, sand dunes, you might want to talk about climate change and how rising sea levels are going to change the location and distribution of sand dunes in the future. So that's going to change everything. If you were doing a topic on, let's say, CBDs, retail in CBDs or something like that, you might want to talk about the future of the high street thanks to globalisation. Are any of us actually going to shop in a high street anymore? And with sustainability, will we try not to travel to CBDs and things like that? Now, if you've got no idea, again, it's a good thing to speak to your teacher about. Conclusion. There's not a lot that you can do to make your conclusion stand out from everybody else's. That's just one idea. Who else might be interested? Like, if you've done something on the characteristics of places, maybe the council would be interested. If you've done something on microclimate, maybe the Met Office or the Environment Agency. I mean, they're not really going to be, are they? No offence, but yeah, you could maybe add that. Evaluation. Okay. The best way to do an evaluation is to take time over it, because the more you think about it, the more ideas you will get. You definitely need to go back, like literally, to your aim, location, hypotheses. Was your theory good? Should you have found more sources? Was your method good? Should your sampling technique have been different? Was your pie chart good, or should you have used a different colour scheme, because actually it's quite hard to tell the difference. In hindsight, should you have done your graphs on Excel instead of drawing them by hand? Like, the more you can think about every single aspect of your coursework, the better. And what you're doing when you're evaluating is you're asking yourself, what's good, what isn't, how could it be better if I did this again? Please don't panic. We are not going to make you do your coursework again. But the more you can think, oh, maybe I should have gone back and looked at the same place in a different season. Maybe I should have compared it to a beach on the north coast as well as having my south coast beach. Maybe I should have tried to get more people to help me, so I could have taken all my measurements at the same time. Whatever. What was good? What wasn't very good? How could it be better? All right, for every single stage you can possibly think of. And then what makes a really nice evaluation is what have you learned. Now, I've put in inverted commas creative. You might need to kind of a bit, you know, like with your personal statements, those of you that apply to UCAS, you find that, you know, your part-time job in a fish and chip shop suddenly becomes fairly exaggerated. You might need to be a bit like that. Like I've learned that reality and theory can be very different things, and just because I read it in a textbook doesn't really mean it's going to happen in reality, or I much better understand the process of, I don't know, globalization or something. Just, yeah, that might be a nice touch. Right, so I will give you access to these, but all of what I've said is going to make a lot more sense. I'm not going to spend very long on this. If you have a look at these exemplars, there's a human one and there's a physical one. Oh, my computer's going to have a funny 5 minutes now. All right, so there's a physical and a human. They are both A star. They're both brilliant. So everything I've just said, if you try and look at those with quite a critical eye, look at how many sources they've got, look at what they've written in their evaluation. I think actually having an exemplar so you can see like the level of detail and things is really, really helpful for doing all of that. Okay, so try that. Obviously, if you've got any questions, you can come back to me. But again, I hope that's helpful. I'll put the PowerPoint and the resources in our team ready for you as well. Okay.